Welcome. Welcome. It's nice to see you, and it's nice to welcome you here. This has been a year. It's been an interesting time. Just to frame for a moment, this is a very different time than the summer of a year ago, 2 years ago. For the first year, we were victim nation. And being victim nation was an integral part of the way we saw the world and experienced the world. And those who come to visit victim nation are coming on a solidarity mission, are coming on a Shiva trip, are coming to see the horror and to be with people who you love, and to hear, and to say, Hineni kan, in one way. But we're no longer a victim nation. Not all Israelis know that. Some want to hold on to victim nation as long as possible. Sometimes you could get used to. After the tragedy, being victim nation has its benefits. It could become a way to look at the world, to look at yourself, and to experience it. But by this summer, we are no longer victim nation. You don't own the skies of Tehran. You don't have the perpetual, ongoing bombing. You don't shift the whole balance of power of the Middle East and still maintain your status as victim nation. We're now warrior nation. And I don't know if we know how to stop being warrior nation. And that's what I want to learn this morning, this evening, this afternoon. It could be profoundly toxic if you are both victim nation and warrior nation at the same time. In this remarkable research group that I started this year, that has become, there are so many things that have become integral to my life, but some of them just stand out. I see Rani is here. He's with me in that. He'll testify. Put together a group of people, about 14, a group of senior educators and research people, together with a whole cadre of new research people from a whole spectrum of the political map. And every Thursday that we meet, I'm a changed person. And what I know and what I understand changes. And what I could teach and talk about is not the same as what I could teach and talk about before being in the room with those people. Nachon, Rani? And being with Rani is one of the reasons for that. But someone observed, and we were talking, last Thursday was our last session for this year. And we'll pick it up in September. We were talking about How has Israel changed? How has Israel changed, and how do we have to prepare ourselves to talk to Israel? If the I Engage Research Seminar is where we try to understand how do we talk about Israel to world Jewry, and how do we understand the challenges and questions and dilemmas of world Jewry, this one, called Israeli Values, is trying to understand what do we have to teach here. And from these two seminars, much of our educational curriculum gets rewritten and rethought. And one of the observations of one of the fellows was that the most popular thing for Israelis to hear right now is that we are right. They love to hear detailed analyses of our moral righteousness and moral superiority. And if you do so, the hits, the likes, and whatever else you count will be off the roof. Is that the thing? Off the roof? Thank you. Off the charts. Off the chart. But at the same time, there has never been a time that I could remember in Israeli society that there is less interest in engaging in moral reflection. If you engage in moral criticism and moral reflection, you are also off the charts, but in the opposite direction. When you decide to do so, you could be accused of betrayal, traitor, enemy, anti-Zionist, subject to death threats, kicked out of the Knesset, a whole range of responses. So I understand this for a moment. We want to engage in a moral discourse as long as its primary impetus and end is to validate and reaffirm. But we don't want to engage in a moral conversation which is reflective, self-critical. And by the way, I apologize, every generalization is silly. But it's a mood. We are still victim nation in the sense that we don't want to hear anybody's criticism. But we understand that to be warrior nation, we don't only have to win in the battlefield, we also have to win in the courts of moral opinion, which we want to win in but don't really want to engage in. We're in a strange place. And I can tell you as a teacher, it's very, very hard to teach in Israel today. It's very, very hard. Because you don't want to be a prophet. You don't want to say what's on your mind. You want to know if what you're saying is something that people could hear, and how do you say it in a way that they can hear? And between victim nation and warrior nation, it's very, very tough. And the question that I and others are asking is, how do we become a peaceful nation? How do we become pursuers of peace? There's almost nobody speaking about peaceful nation. There's bring the hostages home nation. There's heal nation. There's ceasefire to bring the hostages home. There is almost nobody ceasefire so that we could have peace. And even those who speak about ceasefire so that we could bring the hostages home, an integral part of the defense is that, and when Hamas breaks the deal, we'll go back and fight. Bennett, for example, articulates that. Those who are beginning to, in the Likud, to move away from the Likud, from the Netanyahu narrative, speak in those terms. Peaceful nation? End of Gaza? War nation? Tomorrow nation? There is a group thinking about tomorrow. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir have a very clear idea about tomorrow. The rest of Israel is still in warrior nation. And the meaning of your trip, if I could, not being if I could offer, it's not solidarity. It's not a solidarity mission where you're going to go, and maybe you will, and go take pictures in front of the hospital in Beersheba or this or that place in the Tel Aviv area. It's not a solidarity mission. It's a being here mission. And most of you who are here, it's because you can't not be here. And that's why we love you so much. Because you refuse to allow Israel to change without you checking in and seeing and feeling. Because for you, Israel is such a deep part of who you are. You can't imagine who you are without a relationship with Israel. And so we cancel and then say, come for 5 days, and you figure it out. And look, that's why you're the best. And the truth is, none of us really understand where we are. And things change so quickly that we're trying to understand and trying to come to terms with and have language for. And part of the challenge that I believe Israel faces now in the world is that we are talking about ourselves and we are living in a universe completely foreign to the way almost everybody in the world is looking at us. Our notion of reality, our notion of ourself is completely different than the way others. And when we hear it, we don't. So, and as I say all the time, when the difference is great, what do you say? What's the cause for the difference? Anti-Semitism. Baruch Hashem. But and the big challenge of your rabbinate is that that while anti-Semitism is very deep and real and a brand new part of Jewish life and the Torah that you have to teach, and the class that I was supposed to teach originally, but I'm not teaching, is to try to understand how do we understand the role of anti-Semitism in our life? And I was raised on an Auschwitz or Sinai narrative. And this summer, I was, it's okay. By the way, anytime someone calls you, you have to answer. No, you do. It's like, if you want to come here, know that if somebody calls, you answer. And don't worry, you'll get up in the middle and walk to the back. You don't silence, you don't shut off your phone. You don't shut off your phones. It's just, it's not that it's not politically correct, it's not menschlich. So, this summer I was going to hopefully work on a response to Auschwitz or Sinai, because Auschwitz or Sinai was predicated, my father's work was predicated on the idea that anti-Semitism was over. Anti-Semitism wasn't a reality, and therefore, if you chose Auschwitz, you were making a choice to superimpose a past on the present that was no longer relevant, instead of superimposing a future on the present. But that's not the case anymore. But a Torah of anti-Semitism is going to have to wait, because part of the reason was, while I was in the middle of working and struggling, the war happened and I couldn't finish. So I'm in the middle, I have ideas, but it's nowhere worthy of sharing it. But it's also not the critical question that I feel I want to talk about. And what I want you to think about. I want to frame today's class with the famous saying of Baal Sefer HaChinuch. I don't think, we don't know his name. Or maybe we do, but I don't. Who said, Acharei ha'pe'ulot nimshachot halevavot. That feelings, attitudes, opinions don't shape your behavior. They do. Sometimes you act in a way that reflects what you feel and believe. But at the same time, how you act shapes how you feel and how you believe. And that a major part of halachic life is not to act in the way that you feel, but to act so that you will feel the way you should feel. So if Heschel famously says to the student, I can't pray, the Spirit is not moving me, Tefillah 3 times a day says, young man, it's time for you to move the Spirit. Shabbat, halacha, as a system which is meant, and nothing more than our core calendar year, is a system built to move and shape your spirit, shape the way you think, force you to think about things that you wouldn't want to think about, that otherwise, the time would have passed. Well, get up. What concerns me most now as an Israeli and a lover of Israel is, how is Warrior Nation shaping who we are as a people? There were dimensions of Victim Nation that obviously shaped us as well, but we didn't choose it. You don't choose Victim Nation. Just like you don't choose to be frightened from anti-Semitism. It reshapes us, reshapes the way we look at the world. And being Victim Nation is now part of the story of the Jewish people in a way that it was not 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Yossi has been in Victim Nation for a long time. It's not been part of what my experience was. It's just not. But it changes who you are. Warrior Nation is a choice. And part of it is a remarkable choice at the heart of Zionism, in which we declare, I will not be a victim. Warrior Nation is a decision of the Jewish people on October 8th to destroy Hamas and to say, you are not going to turn my life here in Israel into a perpetual experience of victimhood. I am strong. You have hurt me. You have pained me. You have killed and maimed. But and as a Zionist, my response is going to be to claim my right to fight. And as many people, there's a very common phrase, I support Israel's right to exist. I find that statement insane. I find it insulting. Support Israel's right to exist. And on the other side, people rightfully say, anti-Zionists say, do you support Israel's right to exist? And they say, no state has a right to exist. There isn't such a thing as the right to exist for a nation. So you exist. Someone claiming support, I have my right. I much prefer, and I think it's far more indicative of your attitude towards Israel, what Tal Becker remarkably said and taught so many of us around the world in his defense of Israel at the Hague, or the Hague, when he said it cannot be that the only state that does not have a right to defend itself is Israel. That's right, I'm not asking people. When I created boundaries at the Hartman Institute, the boundaries I created weren't, do you support Israel's right to exist, or do you claim, and that's on one side, on the other side, do you believe that the value of life goes beyond Jewish life? And I said, these are the boundaries of the Hartman Institute. If you want to be at the Hartman Institute, you have to function within these boundaries. On one side, you have to accept that all people are created in the image of God, and that human rights and the right to live and a whole slew, the right to food and the right to well-being and happiness is not exhausted by Jews. But on the other hand, it's, do you believe that October 7th happened, and do you believe that Israel has a right to defend itself? By November 15th, you could posit that Israel's committing genocide and still be at the Hartman Institute. I could argue with you. I could say you're wrong. I could say you don't understand the terms. Let's talk. And very often people use the terms in different ways. But if on October 8th I didn't have a right to fight, then you are not part of this Beit Midrash. If I could never fight a just war, you're not part of my conversation. Warrior Nation was a decision. It was a moral decision. It was a great decision. It's a necessary decision in our world. But acharei ha'pulot nimshachot halavavot. What happens when you don't know how to stop? Now, people are getting tired. I want to tell you, people are getting tired. There's more statements of fatigue. Warrior Nation is dissipating, but it's not being challenged. There's a difference. It's getting harder to bear. And the country the government almost doesn't have to stop, and therefore it declares unilaterally that people after 3 years of service are now going to have to add a 4th year of military service. And they just had to suspend that decision. The chief of staff just today suspended that decision. Because who are you talking to? It's like, enough. How much could you demand of these kids? How much could you demand of parents? Both those who are and spouses, those who are going and those who have kids who are going, or kids who have parents. It's like, enough. It's just enough. In addition, one of the observations of this seminar, how has Israel changed? We talk about our emotions much more than we ever had. We're much more raw about them and open about them. And people have had enough. And if the war comes to an end, it will come to an end not because of the rights of Gazans and not because of a hope of a better future, but simply because of fatigue. It's enough. And all of you, if you want to do something this year, on this trip, talk to people who've been in for 300-400 days. What's going on in their life? Talk to people who are independents. Did I say that? Atzmaim? People who don't get a salary. If you get a salary, your company covers you. Who have to run a business. Talk to parents, spouses. But we're still very deeply stuck, and in many ways, Netanyahu is the prime minister for Warrior Nation. And I don't think he has a way to stop yet and still keep his coalition going. Because there's nobody who loves Warrior Nation more right now than Smotrich and Ben Gvir. Not that they don't care about the hostages, and not that chas v'shalom they want our soldiers to die. Chas v'shalom, they don't think in those terms. How many Gazans died doesn't concern them. It's just not even a concern of theirs. And that's why they wouldn't be part of my conversation here at the Hartman Institute. But warrior nation fits them. The first thing I want you to do in your chavruta is I want you to talk with each other on how does warrior nation shape the levavot, shape the heart. What are the characteristics of warrior nation? Been spending a lot of time thinking about this. Just talk. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. And there's multiple, that you can't finish the conversation. But in order to begin to understand Israel, say, what happens when it is now 646 days that you are at war? And you're sitting there and you're waiting. Are they going to make a deal? My nephew, next week, 2 months miluim. Is there going to be a deal? Is there not going to be a deal? My driver, Stowe, over 300 days. He's done. He is just done. How does it shape you? How does warrior nation shape you in a positive way? How does warrior nation shape you in a negative way? And just how does warrior nation define what you feel? Because you can't go for all these days without it changing you. I want to understand certain aspects of it, which I'll focus on, but for yourselves, for your speeches, for your Torah, for your thoughts, for your ability to understand this place. And never in my life have I felt a larger gap between Israelis and world Jewry. Because when you're 646 days warrior nation, and those who are not, you've become a different person. And I'll share some thoughts about that, but you think about it. And talk about it as long as you want. When you finish, I want to study some sources that I've been working with and playing with and teaching for years and years. And those of you in RLI, we studied them. We're not going to study them in the same way this summer, but I taught them to you last summer. How does a warrior nation become a pursuer of peace? And at the outset, I want to tell you, nobody knows. But it is... Nobody knows. At the outset, how does warrior nation become pursuer of peace nation? And how, nobody really knows. But the answer to this question is going to shape the future of the state of Israel. Who we're going to vote for. What's the next coalition? And almost nobody in the Israeli political spectrum even talks about it. And on this level, there is no difference between Netanyahu, Bennett, Gantz, or Lapid. And Avigdor Lieberman. And a bunch of new parties that are coming up. The only party that might think about it a little bit is the Democratim, and even there, how you talk about it is, it's not so much peaceful nation, it's a new take on self-defense. So, and to do that, I want you to basically concentrate in the sources in your source book on Unit 2, which is the way warrior nation speaks about peace. Because nobody could be a Jew without engaging with a conversation about peace. It's just too integral to our tradition. Our tradition, Unit 1 is, it's just all the nice sources about peace. You can't, peace is equivalent to everything. So you have to talk about peace. But how do you talk about it? Warrior Nation also talks about peace. But it's peace through dominance, and read those sources. And if you can't read all of them, just read source 5. Just 5 will be Dayenu. And then there are 2 ways in which Warrior Nation could begin to pursue peace. One that would be messianic, and that's peace with justice. And one which is utopian, which is the idea of utopian peace. And I actually am I've changed a lot of what I feel. I used to hate utopian peace because it's nowhere. And I was obsessed with peace of justice. And I don't know if in Israel you could I know that you're not going to get Israelis to shift from warrior nation to pursuers of peace through the ideas of peace of justice, which also is a huge gap between Israeli Jews and many Jews around the world. And let's talk a little bit about how utopian nation might help. Utopian peace. And there, for peace of justice, read source 9 and 10. And for utopian peace, read first Isaiah 12, and then read Isaiah 14 and 15. If you could do those, that'll be good. And if not, the sources aren't complicated, so that if you feel that you want to spend more time on the first question, don't worry, we'll read the sources. And could I repeat? Sure. Read the following. Source 5, warrior nation and peace. Source 9 and 10. What does peace of justice mean? And could peace of justice help change the dynamic of Israeli society? And then, utopian peace. There's a utopian peace of warrior nation, and there's a utopian peace of pursuing peace nation. The utopian peace of warrior nation is Isaiah 12 and 13, and just read source 12. The utopian peace of Isaiah 14 and 15 might be something we have to start thinking about. And just walking through these sources is what we're going to do together. Any questions before you have your chavrutas? It's now 5:30. We're going to convene back in an hour. And most importantly, just think. Just think. And thinking today will be Dayenu. Okay? Thank you very much. See you in a little bit. One of the first definitions in our tradition of warrior nation is as the curse that Jacob gave to Esau. Esau wanted a bracha, but Yaakov said, I have no more brachot. I gave it all. What am I going to give to you? I gave it all to Jacob. And he says, you know who you're going to be? Al charbecha tichyeh. Your curse is to be warrior nation. Warrior nation was not supposed to be the destiny of the Jewish people. It was the destiny of those who aren't blessed. Now, just both as a result of a question, but also there is an important distinction between warrior nation and a nation that goes to war. When I use warrior nation in a negative context, I'm not advocating for pacifism. I'm not advocating for a fantasy of what world we're living in. I'm not advocating for a particular policy of accommodation towards Hamas. There's a nation that goes to war. War in our tradition, if it is a war of self-defense, is an ultimate expression of your moral responsibilities and of your dignity as a people. That war is part of our reality is a core or a cornerstone of our ability to survive. Warrior nation, however, is not something that you do. It's a term for who you become. Zionism, from its inception, was concerned and thought about what type of nation we would be or what type of nation we would be forced to be. Was war going to be our destiny, or was peace going to be our destiny? Herzl and Alt-Neuland couldn't even imagine. Who isn't? We're colonial? We're a gift to, we're not coming to take over somebody else's land. We're the gift that doesn't stop giving. Who wouldn't want the gift of the Jews? Who wouldn't fantasize of having Jews as neighbors? We're good people, and we're going to bring enlightenment and progress. We're not a colonial enterprise. We're a giving enterprise. But in Zionist thought, there were struggles. Most, or often, believed that we were going to come here, transform this area, and since many Zionist thinkers didn't really engage with the fact that there were people here in our homeland, it was easy to talk about peace. Others were aware early on that conflict was going to be an integral part. And warrior nation and pursuer of peace were vacillated in early Zionist thinking. And they lived together. Much of the history of Israel is the history of the two. At certain times, one became more dominant, and at other times, the other became relevant. And in one of the remarkable classes that we had in that same seminar group that I was speaking about beforehand was a presentation given to us by my friend and colleague Shraga Bar-On, Rabbi Shraga Bar-On, who gave a class to all of us. We were preparing, the David Hartman conference this year was on pursuing peace. And we were asking ourselves, how do we bring this conversation back into Israeli society? And Shraga Bar-On, my colleague and friend, said he gave a class on peace in the Declaration of Independence. And you know, what's brilliant about the greatest thing that a person could do for you is to ask a question that you didn't think before. Who hasn't read the Declaration of Independence? I know it off by heart. But he said, do you know how many times peace is mentioned in the Declaration of Independence? 5. And he says, what's most remarkable is our presentation. We see ourselves, the first time, we're part of the peace-pursuing nations of the world. That's our self-understanding. The Torah of the prophets is justice and what? And peace. This is one of the defining features of our Judaism. But in a far more remarkable way, Shraga said, I want you to try to get into the psyche of the framers of this document. As the document was being written, we didn't know whether this country was going to survive. We were nothing. There were 600,000 Jews here. And that included, who is it who said that we're not just victim nation, we're also traumatized nation? Half of them are Holocaust survivors, who all they could really effectively do is throw them at a front line and hopefully we can wear down the bullets that the other side has. That's more or less the Battle of Latrun. You give them some, what are they going to do? Just die, please. so that the few people who are actually trained could maybe do something. We're survivors. Didn't know. Off the boats. And in the midst and the onslaught of hundreds of millions of people, we're the enemy. 7 countries, we didn't have anything. Literally nothing. And in the middle of the Declaration of Independence, we speak about the fact that we reach our hand out to peace. We appeal in the very midst of the onslaught launched against us now for months to the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel to pursue peace, to preserve peace, and participating in the upbuilding of the State of Israel on the basis of full and equal citizenship and due representation. At that moment, that you can even talk, these are the people who are trying to kill you. And you say, is there another path? We extend our hand to all neighboring states and their peoples in an offer of peace. In 47 or 48, we weren't warrior nation. We were a nation at war. And we tried to balance the need to be in war and still remember that what it is that we wanted. What was it that we aspired for? Warrior nation and peaceful nation each developed their own ethos. One of the primary ethoses of warrior nation was the idea of tov lamut ba'ad artzeinu. It is good to die for our country. I made Aliyah in 1971, and I was at the end of that warrior nation ethos. I was taught, I heard, tov lamut ba'ad artzeinu. It was debated, but I heard it, and it shaped me. And as many of you know, when I was drafted, and since I don't use one eye, they put me in a non-combat unit. I asked to be retested, and I cheated on my eye exam so that I could become a combat soldier and a tank commander. Did I want to die? No. But it was just part of what you knew needed to be in your universe. Getting a medal for sure. But it was what you had to be a part of. It was. Tov lamut ba'ad artzeinu really stopped after the Yom Kippur War. The Yom Kippur War and the war in Lebanon created a different balance, and people started to speak about tov lichyot ba'ad artzeinu. People began to actually think or dare to hope that Natan Alterman's poem, Al Magash HaKesef, what's it called in English? On the silver. That, no, I don't want that. I'm not giving you my kid. And dared to think that that's possible. The Yom Kippur War, the war in Lebanon, the Yom Kippur War with the proximity to total destruction and then the ultimate victory gave birth to a whole genre of songs that this will be the last war. And peaceful nation began to outweigh warrior nation. Ultimately, this led to the Oslo Accords. And the same peaceful nation that reached out already in Declaration of Independence, which should have been the last place it appeared. But Zionism was an aspirational vision of a different life. Oslo is when peaceful nation began to win, and it was very close. It was really close. And it came down to a Mitsubishi car, giving, what was his name, Goldschmidt? Goldschmidt, he's Jewish. So one of the two. They gave him a Mitsubishi and a deputy minister, so he left one party and came and voted for Oslo, and Oslo passes. And back then you could steal a vote from one side to the other. It was really close, and the country was split, and Oslo was passed. And peaceful nation begins to take over for a lot of people. But peaceful aspirations led to terror, led to the failure of Oslo, and led to the Second Intifada. And peaceful nation was shelved. Not only in our daily consciousness, but also in much of our aspirations. We have no peace, if there is no peace partner. And in the Declaration of Independence, they still assume that there could be a peace partner. That despite everything, there was somebody to talk to. After the Second Intifada, most Israelis began to feel there's nobody to talk to. What am I going to talk? Like in Gaza, I'm going to talk to Hamas. Like, who am I going to talk to? How do you do peaceful nation with an enemy of and here I'm quoting Israeli discourse. I'm not saying it's correct discourse. Who are willing to sacrifice the lives of their children, or who want to kill us more than they want to save the lives of their children. This is standard Israeli discourse, an ABC that everybody knows. So what am I going to do? And peaceful nation gets set aside, and warrior nation becomes dominant. But warrior nation post-Second Intifada goes through a fascinating transformation. It's not the warrior nation of pre-1967. It's not the warrior nation of 1967 or even 73. It becomes a dominant consciousness in which the peace camp gets disintegrated. It's quieted. Songs stop being written about peace. It disappears. It almost lives alone. Even the peace camp disappears. Forget peace now. Any conversation about peace. And the maximum you can think about is disengagement. Disengagement is not peace. Disengagement is a divorce in which your goal is to get the best deal. But the second is that we become warrior nation and startup nation at the same time. And warrior nation and startup nation are very interesting. Because warrior nation and startup nation says you could be warrior nation without tov lamut ba'ad artzenu. You don't have to. There's something for you to live for. There's prosperity. We become warrior nation and prosperity nation. And our technology teaches us, and our military dominance teaches us, that we could be warrior nation without that many casualties. And we are warrior nation who actually doesn't want to go to war. It's fascinating. For about 20 years, we are a warrior nation who doesn't want to go to war, who has more tolerance for civilian casualties as a result of terrorist attacks than we have for soldiers' deaths in acts of military engagement. One of the operations in Gaza, a Golani half-track goes over a mine, 12 soldiers are killed, the war is over. And Netanyahu, who is the prime minister of warrior nation, is the prime minister of the ceasefire. We don't want to die as warrior nation. And in many ways, that was the new status quo that takes hold in Israel. It was that you could be warrior nation and startup nation simultaneously. You could be warrior nation without having to pay a price of magash hakesef, of the silver platter. And in fact, under Netanyahu, we become deeper and deeper alienated from peace nation. Warrior nation is our persona, and less soldiers die under Netanyahu than under any other prime minister who pursued peace. We don't pursue peace, and soldiers don't die. Less soldiers die under Netanyahu than anybody else. That, everybody speaks about the conceptia of October 7th. This was one of the conceptia. There's the conceptia that Hamas could be controlled through money, and another conceptia is that you could be warrior nation and startup nation simultaneously. And that we could control them. And in many ways, Iron Dome is the embodiment of warrior nation and startup nation simultaneously. Our technology, the cameras on the walls. And it just took a little fapishta, $20 drone to take out every camera. And then startup nation is in many ways overrun by primitive nation. October 7th, that status quo was broken, not just empirically, but also psychologically. And with the 1,200 casualties or so of October 7th, Israeli society begins to accept casualties as an integral part of warrior nation. And if you want to understand some of the most dramatic changes that have occurred over the last 600 or so days, is the acceptance of casualties on the part of Israeli society. Over and again, 5 soldiers, 7 soldiers. Things that would have brought forth the greatest outcry, criticism. Criticism, bring the war to an end. It's tolerable. We know that we need to be again warrior nation, and to be warrior nation, even if it does not mean tov lamut ba'ad artzeinu, we're going to have to lamut ba'ad artzeinu. Israel attacks Iran and accepts and assumes that there's going to be at the minimum 800 civilian casualties and thousands of injured. That was the operating premise, the operational premise of the attack on Iran. Hundreds and hundreds of casualties. That's what we figured. And Israelis said, and look at the way Israel, the fortitude. We made jokes about it, the going in and out of the shelter, and Yossi and I have spoken about that a lot. But the experience. Like my friend Eli Katz is here. The difference between he and I is that his shelter is across the street. So every single time you get this stupid thing waking you up, you don't just go downstairs. You have to go across the street into the other building. It's like you don't sleep. But it was sort of, okay, if this is what we got to do, part of warrior nation is strong. There's a strength, there's a fortitude, a willingness to sacrifice. If you want to know how does warrior nation change you, sacrifice becomes a given. Becomes a given. And it becomes acceptable. And as a result, the price of the war has almost, with the exception of the price to the hostages, has almost never been a part of the criticism and discourse around the war in Gaza. That's a shift. It's a shift. It's the opposite. It was soldiers' deaths that we couldn't accept, but when you're a hostage, for a whole slew of reasons, ideological, traditional, and others, hostage casualties, it was like almost, it's enough. Anybody, October 7th, it was too much. That which we have to sacrifice afterwards, that's okay. But that has to come to an end. But what in this new warrior nation, not a nation that goes to war, but in this warrior nation which is not balanced by peaceful nation, what has become of us? What are some of its characteristics? And I asked you to think about it. And I want to share with you some of mine, without any claim that this is an exhaustive list, but this is a list that I'm thinking about because it has very, very significant consequences on our people and on where we're going to go. And on how do we build an Israel of tomorrow, not just a Gaza of tomorrow, but an Israel of tomorrow. What future do we have? What future do we have? And there's more and more Israelis who are questioning whether they have a future, whether they want to raise their kids here. And if we're going to win, it's not going to be by diminishing the need for sacrifice, but it's by being able to overcome this persona of being. Warrior Nation believes that reality is a jungle. That Israel, we are living in a jungle. We like to call ourselves a villa in the jungle. That's an Israeli self-perception, which aggravates many of our enemies who believe that, or our neighbors, who don't believe that they're exactly in a jungle and don't think we're such a villa in the first place. But Warrior Nation lives in a Hobbesian universe. You're living in a jungle. And the primary reality of a jungle is its war of all against all. That is reality. In the jungle, you look at the world as divided between friend and enemy. Who's competing? Who's endangering you? Who do you have to kill in order to survive? Power and its use are critical and holy in the jungle. It's the only thing that you have. It's your inalienable right, and it's all that you have that's going to keep you going. Powerful and the powerless, and making sure that you have more power, because in the jungle, that's the only way you're going to survive. Survival is not only the primary aim, it becomes the primary value. Not survival for the sake of, not ethics, not human rights, just survival. When the reality is jungle, that becomes part of the way you look at the world. In a world in which survival is critical and it's divided between friend and foe, your foe has no rights. No rights. You can't even think about their rights. You can't even be concerned about them. And that's why when you're in Israel and you feel you're in a jungle, you have one attitude towards Gazans, and when you're 6,000 to 10,000 miles away, you have a different. You have room. You think about it differently. Because you don't feel their eneminess to the same degree. You don't feel the jungleness to the same degree. And that's why in Israel, to this very day, the majority of Israelis would be very comfortable with a transfer of Gazans from Gaza. Because you don't claim me. Humanitarian aid, it's now becoming a conversation in Israel because we are realizing how detrimental it is for our survival in the jungle. In the jungle, it turns out that power is not only muscle and weapons. Public relations and attitudes and trade are an integral part of this more nuanced modern jungle. And are we winning or losing and recognizing that we could lose? Who knew that F-35s, there's parts that we get from Holland? Who even thunk of it? Like Holland? That I have to worry what you are actually thinking about me? Who are you? I have enough flowers. But oops, you actually have factories which make F-35s, and in England, we thought, oh, it's just America. It turns out that in this global economy, these weapons are produced all over, and we need Spain. I knew that they had parts. We vacation in Spain. It's like we like their soccer, but they actually produce something for we. And so now there's a conversation. Maybe in this jungle, we do have to worry, and we do have to talk about our people being killed as they're waiting to come to get food at the GHF. And these are now reported on a regular basis in Israeli press. While civilian casualties weren't discussed at all, and the only thing that's changed, it's not that we're not a jungle anymore, it's just what is needed to survive in that jungle, and a more complicated analysis of that. In this survival, not only does your other have no human rights, and it's just not of your concern. When you are fighting for survival, you are not open to any criticism. Conceptually, I shouldn't be criticized, because if survival is my only moral responsibility, what are you criticizing me for? But more than that, criticism becomes viewed as an act of an enemy in this war, as distinct from a Jewish tradition which sees criticism as an essential part of your growth and actualization. Criticism enables me to be all who I have to be, but when I'm in a jungle, I have no notion of being all that I have to be or all that I ought to be. All I have is a notion of being. And in that sense, criticism becomes dangerous, and my critics become my enemy. And there's very little place for criticism inside, and friend or foe is not only the person who's trying to kill me, it's also the person who's critiquing me, whether in Israel or outside of Israel. The state becomes integral to my survival and becomes holy as a vehicle for warrior nation. Because it is only through the state, not a state which carries my rights, but a state which is and protects my rights, but the state which is the repository of our individual power, which then gets maximized to become a force to enable and enhance my survival. The notion of the state, national terms of loyalty, become elevated in Israeli conversation. Ne'emanut. The anger at the Haredim, which has never been similar. There's almost no precedence because we allowed them not to serve. Now, you're not, is this an act of betrayal? No criticism of me and no criticism of the state. And then there is actually a journey, and it's not a necessary journey, and it doesn't happen everywhere. But warrior nation is also a nation in which the shift from nationalism to ultranationalism becomes possible. And for many becomes even necessary. And the popularity of ultranationalist groups increases. And even nationalists, national moral parties like the Likud, echo and speak in ultranationalist terms. And even nationalist parties like led by Gantz and Yair Lapid lose their voice, have no way to talk. And look at the initial vote to remove Ayman Odeh from the Knesset. They voted for it. Now they're going to vote against. It's not going to pass. But like these, you see it. warrior nation which isn't tempered by peaceful nation, it's not easy to stem the tide to ultranationalism and fascism. And so our country shifts, and the people shift and change. And I'm not blaming anyone. Who's there to blame? Like, who are you blaming? You want to feel good about yourself? Blame. Okay. This is my people. This is where they are. You have to experience talking to grade 12 students. If you want to know where Israelis are, I teach grade 12 boys and girls 5 classes, just talking about anything they want to talk about. In Hartman, this is an enlightened liberal nation of the children of Baka, Katamonim, and Arnona, and Talpiot, our children. And you see how deep warrior nation shifts and changes who you are. So what do we do? What do we do? First, we have to recognize that we've changed. Now, warrior nation is also peaceful nation. But while there could be peaceful nation that serves as a counterbalance to warrior nation, there's also a peaceful nation that's dominated by warrior nation. I spoke about the blessing to the curse to Esau. Let's look at the blessing to Jacob. What was the blessing to Jacob? Source 8. Vayigash, vayashek lo, vayarach et reach begadav, vayivarchehu. Re'eh reach beni kareach sadeh asher barchu Adonai. Vayiten lecha Elohim mitala shamayim umishamnei haaretz, umishmanei haaretz, v'rov dagan v'tirosh. You'll have great wealth and success. But then, Ya'avducha amim v'yishtachavu lecha le'umim. Heve gvir la'achicha v'yishtachavu lecha b'nei imecha. Orerecha aor umevarchecha baruch. What's the bracha? You're going to be dominant. God doesn't give Jacob the blessing of peaceful coexistence with his neighbors. God blesses him with the power to be at peace because unlike Esau, he doesn't have to live by his sword. Do you know why? Because he wins. He wins. And when he wins, Ya'avducha amim. The nations will be enslaved to you. This gets translated into biblical law in Deuteronomy chapter 20. When turning nations into slaves, at best, becomes the legitimate objective of war. Ki tikrav el ir lihilachem aleha v'karata eleha l'shalom. The word ask, speak, call peace. We're a peaceful nation. Who loves peace more than the Jews? Nobody. That's why whenever we go to war, we start by what? Offering terms of peace. But what are the terms of peace? V'haya im shalom te'ancha. This is the shalom of Jacob. Im shalom te'ancha upatcha lecha, then v'haya kol ha'am hanitzava yeh lecha lamas va'avaducha. What is peace? That they are enslaved to you. And if they have the chutzpah not to be as peace-loving as you, V'im lo tashli mimach, and then they, not us, they, va'asta imach milchama v'tzarta, then v'tzarta aleha, and God will give them in your hands, v'hikita et kol schora lefi charev, and you wipe out all the men, rak hanashim v'hataf v'behema. All that will be your booty and will be yours. Kol shtala tavoz lecha v'chalta shlal oivecha asher natan Adonai Elohecha lach. This is literally the bracha of Yaakov. God's giving it to you. Avducha amim. Which amim? Not shivat amamim. And just like the Avducha amim in Genesis is nations in general, Deuteronomy is very clear. Ken ta'aseh l'chol ha'arim ha'rechokot mimcha ma'od. This is what you should do to all the nations that live very far from you. This is not the 7 nations, because when it comes to the 7 nations, they don't even have the option of peace. Then you have to wipe everybody out. Men, women, children, everyone. So that they will not move you, transition you out of your monotheism into a world of idolatry. This is peace. This is peace of warrior nation. And I'm not comparing, and it's not the same, but if you want to understand some of the challenges of ending the war in Gaza, is what do you want? What do you want? You want Avducha? Is that the end of the war? Is Vayulecha Lamas va'avaducha? Is that the end? And I'm going to continue. There's no other language. How do you end the war? It's self-evident, as I was discussing before with somebody. Everybody in Israel understands that Hamas cannot remain in power in Gaza. Everybody understands that. And it becomes a false debate between, do you want Hamas to remain in power? Do you not want Hamas to remain in power? When that is the category of the debate, you have no credibility in Israeli society. And part of Netanyahu's great strength is his ability to dominate that conversation and to posit it as that's the juxtaposition. You want Hamas in power? I don't want Hamas in power. And since I don't want Hamas in power, what am I going to do? Am I going to build a city in Rafiah? And today there's all this analysis now of, what are you even talking about? What does a 1 million person village in Rafiah even mean? Like, what do you have to do for sewage? Current estimate, 10 billion shekel just to build it. Just to build it. How do you even do it? But yeah, you know why we want that city? A, because we want to destroy Hamas. And B, from that city, we could have this is Netanyahu Mefurash, as we say. From that city, we will be offering the options of voluntary immigration to wonderful places. How do you even end the war when this is your notion? And the failure of the opposition is that the only catalyst for ending the war is to bring the hostages back, but a significant conversation about maybe ending the war, and that the way to defeat Hamas at this time is through some political process. I'm not saying it's simple, but after 646 days, it doesn't seem that the military option has been that successful. So at least do we want to try another option? But it's almost not present in the Israeli political discourse. And now Netanyahu is about to engage possibly in this. And this is the essence of the Witkoff plan, is to bring about the eradication of Hamas, but through a political process which is fraught, everybody knows. How does Netanyahu sell this to a country which is in warrior nation mode? How do you even talk about it? How do you feel safe with that? Because if the only way is I have to fight, what else am I going to do? And you're now going to present plans to a people, which maybe you and Ron Dermer spoke about, but that no one really even knows what you're talking about. Or certainly there hasn't been a vibrant conversation about which political process might give us a better outcome. If any, I'm not saying any, but at least talk about it. But Warrior Nation has peace, which is va'avaducha. In many ways, the conversation about Gaza tomorrow is part of the same status quo of Warrior Nation and Startup Nation for the last 20 years. That we could somehow have Warrior Nation and win without any political compromise or vision. Doesn't exist. It's just outside of the discourse. And Warrior Nation and Startup Nation did not spend a minute thinking about a future or a different future in Judea and Samaria. Now, it could be there wasn't any, but we haven't even talked about it. And as I say very often, if you go to the average Israeli now and you speak to someone who's 18 and below, they don't even know. And you ask them, are you for a two-state solution? They don't even know what you're talking about. The terms in Hebrew aren't even clear. It's like there isn't even a category that's used. It's not even it's like you grow up in Tabad, Medina Palestine. Like, what do you, it's like Medina Palestine. It's like, don't even know what you're talking about. It's not like they're against it. It's not even a coherent term. And if you want to talk again about the distance between Israeli Jewry and world Jewry, and again, it's understandable. The consequences of Warrior Nation are immense. And as I said, I don't know what to do. We're struggling. What I do know is deep in my soul, and this makes me a huge minority in the state of Israel, not completely alone, but not exactly the most popular person in the universe, is for me, peace at its core is peace of justice. I believe that Gazans and Palestinians have inalienable rights that obligate me. I have a right too. And I'm not going to commit suicide in order to enable their rights to be fulfilled, but their rights compel me. And just like Moshe Rabbeinu in Cheshbon, he turns to Cheshbon, to what's the Sichon Melech Cheshbon, and he says to him, could I go through your land? But it's yours, it's not mine. The fact that I could take it, that I'm able to take it, that I'm stronger than you, doesn't mean I'm going to take it. It's yours. Anywhere I go, any food that I buy, any water, did you read the source? You know the source. Anything that I take, I'm going to pay for, because my presumption is that you have, in a world of justice, inalienable rights to your home. And my needs don't invalidate your rights. But in this text, it's not that Moshe is a part of Warrior Nation. God is a part of Warrior Nation. And what does God do? God hardens his heart and forces him to go to war. God has adopted Warrior Nation in the blessing of Jacob as the rightful place of God's chosen people. You have a right to anything that you want whenever you want it, because the rights of others is to peace of servitude. And God, being God, is able to enforce that status. And that's what God does. But God is only one voice in our tradition. And thank God, thank God, we're here too. Source 10. Davar acher. Az yashir Yisrael. Ze echad mishlosha dvarim she'amar Moshe lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'hu amar lo limadetani. In one of the remarkable category that God, there are things in the Torah which God says, thank you for sharing, you've taught me something that I did not know. The third is Kishamar la Kadosh Baruch Hu aseh milchama im Sichon afilu hu eino mevakesh lasot imach milchama at tgar bo milchama. Even though he doesn't want to go to war, you start the war. As it says, Kumu su'u v'ivru et nachal Arnon. But Moshe lo asaken. Moshe says, I don't want to be warrior nation. V'shlach malachim va'omar lo. V'shlach lo malachim. And Moshe picks the peace of justice rather than the peace of domination. But unlike the Bible, the rabbis rewrite the ending of the story. And instead of God canceling out Moshe's decisions and forcing Sichon Melech Heshbon to fight us, here in our rewritten Bible, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu chayecha she'ani mevatel dvarai u'mekayem dvarecha. I cancel it. I'm going to give up on the bracha of Yaakov. I don't want the world in which everyone who's not you, the maximum rights that they have is to live as a slave in servitude. They have a right, and God says, I accept that. And this is now going to be the definition of shalom. And that's what I mean, ki tikrav al ir lilachem aleh v'karata eleh shalom. What I really mean there is I know you have to cut and paste and delete the end of the story, but that's okay, we could do that. We're going to delete it, we're going to change it, and now shalom doesn't mean shalom, the shalom of Jacob, it means the shalom of justice. This idea is very deep in the teachings of your congregations and in the teachings of much of diasporic Jewish life. This is the peace that the Declaration of Independence spoke about. It spoke about peace of justice. But warrior nation is alienated from this. And I can't tell you, there's almost no ability to speak this way. You try to speak this way. I wish you were just naive. There are people on the other side, they want to kill you. Why should they have rights if they want to kill you? There are no innocents in Gaza. All Palestinians are, etc. Even the notion that this category of peace of justice should apply to the Palestinian conflict, and let alone to Gaza in any term, is not even coherent. So what do we do? And again, I don't know. I have prayers. I know that one of the jobs of utopian dreams, a utopian dream, its strength is that it doesn't claim to be anywhere. I used to hate utopian dreams because they're nowhere, and I want peace somewhere. I need peace now. Not now, I need peace here. I don't need peace now, I need peace here. I don't need utopias. So when you read V'gar ze'evim keves, that the lion or the wolf will lie down with the lamb, okay. That's fine, but what are you supposed to do with Isaiah 11? Okay, when the wolf will lie down with the lamb, I'll be for a Palestinian state. As long as I'm the wolf. Like what am I supposed to... It's like peace is possible, utopia is so nowhere, it speaks about a value that presupposes a world that I cannot influence and shape. And as a result, I was down on utopian peace for for many years. When I put this unit together and started to teach it about 10, 12 years ago, and found looking at all the different ways our tradition speaks about peace, utopian peace was a model of the ineffective peace, and that the effective one was the peace of justice. I've come to realize that right now, at least in my country, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I can't speak about peace of justice. But at the same time, utopian peace what do I do with it? Okay, when the world changes, then maybe. It's like nothing that I could do. But when you actually look at the different visions of utopian peace, another idea emerges. There is a utopian peace, which is the same peace of the blessing of Jacob. And that's Isaiah 13. And Babylon, and it's a mitzvah to read Isaiah in English, because for the life of me, I can never understand them in Hebrew. None of the prophets, I know they speak Hebrew, but it's a Hebrew completely foreign and alien to mine. And I have no idea what they're talking. I can understand 50%, maybe 70% of the words, and then I get lost. So here I'm going to read in English. And Babylon, glory of kingdoms. Like that's what Tzvi Mamlachot means. Glory of kingdoms, proud splendor of the Chaldeans, shall become like Sodom and Gomorrah, overturned by God. And you can understand it, you could see it. What Babylon did to us was far worse than what Hamas did on October 7th. When I have a dream of a utopia, of a perfect world, and it's nowhere, because who has all the power? Utopia means nowhere. It's nowhere. It has no connection to reality. But if I'm going to sit and fantasize, you son of a bitches are going to be dead. What you think that when we spoke about Hamas as Amalek, nothing. Sodom and Gomorrah, wiped out. Because there are no innocents in Sodom and Gomorrah, and there are no innocents in Gaza. They're wiped out. Nevermore shall it be settled, nor dwelt in throughout all the ages. It's literally, even without quoting the verses, you see the language applied. Wiped out, destroyed, 80% of the house, everything wiped out. Never to be rebuilt, not even by President Trump. No Arab, including no Arab, no Saudi Arabia, no Emirates, none of you are going to build here a great new Riviera. No Arab shall pitch his tent there, no shepherds make flock lie down there. Beasts shall lie down there, and the houses will be filled with owls. There shall ostriches, what that is, make their homes. I know what an ostrich is, but I don't know what they thought an ostrich was. And there shall satyrs, I don't know what this is, dance. And jackals shall abide in its castles, and dragons in the palaces of pleasure. Her hour is close at hand, her days will not be long. This is a fitting dream for warrior nation. That's the only type of dream we can have. But the God will pardon Jacob, because this is by Jacob, doesn't have to live by the sword. God will again choose Israel, and we will settle him on their own soil. Strangers shall join them and shall cleave to the house of Jacob, and people shall take them and bring them to their homeland. And the house of Israel shall possess, and the house of Israel shall possess them as slaves and handmaids on God. So this is literally, you could see the lines of Shalom va'avaducha. It's like I wish I was that smart, but somebody it's just shouting at you. These categories keep on repeating. They keep on repeating, coming back over and again. This is our utopia. But we have another utopia. And it's Isaiah, and I don't know if this is Isaiah 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I don't know. I never knew. And it could be that Isaiah 11 is a different Isaiah. I have a case. It doesn't matter to me. Somebody knows. But here it also speaks, Isaiah 2. Here too it also speaks about the Beit HaMikdash and the house of the God of Jacob. But here the nations of the world don't come to serve us in our temple. Here, Valchu amim rabim va'amru l'chu v'na'aleh el har Adonai el bet Elohei Yaakov v'yorenu midrachav v'nelecha baruchotav ki mitzion tetzei Torah dvar Hashem Yerushalayim. Now, the nations of the world aren't our servants. They're coming to benefit from a people who aspires to be a light unto the world. Our dream changes and they change. Now they are partners with us in enlightenment. Not partners in servitude, partners in enlightenment. And in that world of enlightenment, v'shabat ben hagoyim v'ochiach la'amim rabim v'chitetu charvotam le'itim v'richanitotam le'mizmerot lo yisa goy el goy cherev v'lo yilmedu od milchama. That's a different utopia. I don't want Babylon to be turned into Sodom and Gomorrah. I want war to end. I don't want to imagine a day where I am victorious over all. I want to imagine a day where I don't have to be warrior nation. Two concrete thoughts, and with that, I'll conclude and open up for any questions and comments. How do we get Israelis to talk about utopias, dreams? And which utopia do you dream about? The power of utopia is that it's precisely because it is nowhere that you don't believe that it endangers your survival. When you're in warrior mode, fighting against Sodom and Gomorrah, you don't understand. You can't speak about their rights, and you don't understand what you're talking about. What does it mean? But it's precisely by saying, I'm not talking about what's operational now. I'm not talking about what's operational tomorrow. I want to ask you a question. If you could, what do you want? If everything was possible, what do you want? If you could get rid of Hamas, if you could actually have a peace partner, what do you want? Talk. Put that as part of a conversation. That is not part of our artistic, cultural, and educational language anymore. It's interesting. It's started to come back now a little bit. A little bit. A people that has a utopia has the ability to shape its future. Because the fascinating thing about utopia is that it is actually one of the most pragmatic methods to introduce aspiration in an unredeemed world. In an unredeemed world, it is easy to fall into despair. It is easy to accept that which is as that which will always be. The power of utopia is that it at least allows you to imagine. And we are a people who have proven the practical, pragmatic power of utopia. What is a Jew if not that? What is a Jew if not someone who said, Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim? That was like the ultimate utopia. We read Isaiah. We read different parts. But it's interesting. The utopia of wiping out, sort of, okay, it's Shloch Hamatcha L'Goyim. But more or less, that wasn't the utopia that accompanied Israel as we came back to our homeland. It wasn't Isaiah 13, it was Isaiah 2. Zionist thinkers, even Jabotinsky was not even the most, maybe the most, but even the far right wings, and very often in Israel it was the right wing who were more liberal than the left wing, who understood that people have inalienable rights. It wasn't about killing them all and wiping them all out. It wasn't about them serving us. We were able to dream. We dreamt about coming home. And that dream sustained us, and reality never defined us. And so now that we've come home, we have to resurrect. Israel is real is actually deeply, deeply problematic. The power of Zionism is its reality. But where is part of reality as a Jew is asking yourself, what do you dream about? Who do you want to be? Not peace now, but utopian peace has a possibility of creating some space for Israelis to talk about peace that doesn't threaten them. This government, however, It's not there. But that's the job of educators. That's the job of rabbis. That's the job of politicians who actually have some courage. But the last is that if we do not hold on to peace of justice, at least as a value, not as a political platform, who are we? Who are we? In the Declaration of Independence, it speaks of the vision of the prophets. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisaged by the prophets. Justice and peace. If we don't have peace of justice, who are we? If Israel doesn't have a vision of peace and justice, will you and your students and your congregants want to have any relationship with us? This has to be part of our teaching. Now, how do we just keep it as part of our teaching without it feeling that it needs to be implemented? It's just, I can't tell you how hard it is. But that's what we have to do. We have to embrace utopian peace precisely because it's utopian, and realize that in difficult times, utopia is your salvation. And at the same time, we have to remember who we are. I don't know if we're the villa in the jungle, but we didn't come back to Israel for Hamas to define who we are as a people and to define our practices. Yet the only people who talk in that language today are people in the military. The only people who explicitly speak that we don't act this way are military. Our politicians aren't speaking that way. Whether new elections will bring that forth, I don't know. But here's the job of the teachers, of the educators, to remind us not only what we need to aspire for, but to remind us who we are. Who we are. And if in the middle of what was truly an existential battle in 1948, we could remember who we are, at this moment, with all of our power and victory, it should be easier to remember who we are. What does it mean to be a Jew? Mandalaich snei lechavrach lo ta'avid zoi kol haTorah kula, vashar perusha hi zil gmor. That's the Torah that has to come out of Zion. And doing so is one of the great responsibilities of anyone and everyone who loves this country. And now, are there any questions or comments, please? Yes, please. There's going to be a microphone coming. Right behind you.
In source 5, 17. רק מערי העמים האלה אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך נחלה, לא תחיה כל נשמה. Now, the simple meaning of לא תחיה כל נשמה is you won't let anyone to survive.
I apologize. We have a great sound system here which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I can't hear. Could you just pass me this chair? From over there, I can't hear. From here, I could hear you.
Would you like me to repeat?
I would need you to repeat if you want me to respond.
No problem. Well, in source number 5, it says on פסוק 17, רק מערי העמים האלה, אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך נחלה, לא תחיה כל נשמה. Meaning in Eretz Israel, in Eretz Canaan. Now, לא תחיה כל נשמה means you won't let anyone to survive.
Genocide.
Genocide. But it also, it has a deeper meaning. And the deeper meaning is, of לא תחיה כל נשמה, is that your soul also won't survive it.
Okay, it's a good
Now,
brush.
I'm turning to source 9.
First of all, Yishal Kochacha.
Thank you very much.
It's like I never heard that one because who would have thunk? But in any event, the limits of interpretation are reached when we pass them.
We read it and it's
Beautiful.
written.
I'm all in.
It's
I'm
written.
all in. Very nice.
Now, in source number 9, pasuk starting from 14, it says that אנשי המלחמה, the warriors, you spoke about the warriors.
Yeah, yeah.
אנשי המלחמה, it took 38 years till they all died. Yes?
Who are
Now,
the Anshe Milchama?
אנשי המלחמה, we know them as the people of חטא העגל, but here they are something else. Here they are the warriors. Just
No,
a
it's
minute.
not the Chet HaEgel. It's the Chet HaMeraglim. But you're right. Go on. Go.
Right. Yeah, sorry. Right. Anyway, here they are called אנשי מלחמה, and what it said on 17, on 16, ויהי כאשר תמו כל אנשי המלחמה למות מקרב העם, וידבר אדוני אלי. Meaning, God doesn't talk to warriors.
Doesn't talk to?
God doesn't talk to warriors.
Ah.
And the question that I want to ask is the price that Judaism pays now. Isn't the price loss of the soul and loss of the speaking of God?
I'm not going to use yours as a question. I'm going to allow it to be a statement which should enter into the Torah of this Beit Midrash as a bracha. Okay? So thank you. You might want to add one other part, which is in Divrei Hayamim, where God says to David, you shall not talot tivne bait lishmi ki,
ידיך מגואלות בדם.
because your hands are filled with blood. Ki ishtamimad. You like your, so like all of that could all be added into. What you've done is you've taken some of the other sources and put them into and Yishal Kochacha. Thank you. Yes, please. Oops. Toda rabba.
So I wanted to ask you about how you define justice in the realm of peace through justice. Because one of the things that I saw in the texts as I was thinking about Isaiah is what he's imagining is that all of the horror that was visited on our people be visited on the people who visited on us. And that's what's being described.
Correct.
We were made to be servants. We were made to be slaves. We were victims of siege. So let that all be what happens to them. So the question that I am curious about is when you talk about peace through justice,
What's justice?
does that only happen when you visit the horrors that your enemies visited on you? Can there be justice without that? And what does peace through justice
That's
mean
correct.
if not that?
Great question, and a place where that conversation takes place. Smotrich speaks about justice. You're absolutely right. There's a justice of ayin tachat ayin. There is that justice. Of justice can be giving to the other what they deserve. Justice could also be human rights. So part of the debate, part of the fight that we have is what constitutes justice. Very few people walk around and saying, I'm for injustice. That's what makes it hard. So you're right, it could be. That's part of our fight. I don't have a resolution. I just know what I mean by justice. What I mean by justice is like Moshe Rabbeinu Rekeh, it's yours. I believe, and again, I'm going further, I believe that Gazans and Palestinians have a right to the land on which they live. They don't just have a right to be repaid for all the evil that they wrought upon me. They have another right. Now again, that's part of the conversation that we have to have. Nobody wins. Nobody gets to claim. That's the same thing, just like you don't claim to own peace. Everybody speaks about peace. What you mean by peace could change. Same thing with justice, and your point is very well taken. And sometimes it's a little bit of both also. Sometimes part of the justice is to get back what you deserve. I bichlal believe that if we had started the conversation, the war in Gaza, it's really easy to be smart right now And I'm trying to be really smart now. After knowing so many things for so many days, I think of all the things that we could have said at the beginning of the war and the things that we could have done. And we could have spoken about justice even in your terms. We could have spoken about Gaza right after October 7th and said, Gaza as it exists today will no longer be. A society that produces, a country that produces this amount of evil is going to cease to exist. And then at the same time, if we would have said, but we have no desire to take control of Gaza, and we have no desire to kill innocent civilians, and therefore, from the beginning, we're going to create humanitarian zones and places for innocents. And then we are going to move in and we are going to wipe, even use that language, that justice requires a reshaping of this reality until every tunnel is not destroyed. A new society needs to rebuild, but it's done with a recognition of another justice. A justice of retribution is also possible, but we didn't do either of the above. We just effed it up from the beginning, and as a result, even when we did one, we lost the world in doing so. So I accept that it is a much more complicated. But then again, if you want justice, which is a person deserves, you also have to talk about what else they deserve. They can't just deserve, unless you're an Isaiah 13 person. All they deserve is the retribution of God, because your world is a world in which the others could only be avaducha at the end. I hope that's, but thank you for that. Yes, please.
Thank you. We have two challenges as rabbis in America. One, the challenge that you gave us now is to remind the Israeli people that we are not a warrior nation, or there's another way. But is there a way, the other option, which is maybe impossible, the other option is to try and teach our people there that we need to be a warrior nation if we want to close the gap. And I'm kind of just puzzled.
Fair enough.
What seems more improbable or impossible?
It's a great question.
Can a
great
college
question.
teenager or understand the need of being a warrior?
I know Yossi and we talk about this a lot, and I overstate my case to one side, and it needs to be more in the middle. And you're right. And one of the problems with certain places No, it didn't. No, I'm back. There's a spot. Yeah, I have to. One of the challenges that nationalism has is that in many circles, in many progressive and some liberal circles, the whole idea of particular identity and the right to fight and defend your particular identity is undermined. It's true. And as I forget, this phenomenal article said the greatest critics of nationalism are people living in very vibrant, liberal, stable national environments. They're the critics of it, but they don't respect what does it mean to fight for it, and how do you protect what you have? And the right of Israel to defend itself is easy, I believe, to posit, as long as it doesn't get the feeling that that's our only solution. But you're right, we need to, yes, I don't know which one's going to be easier, but I think you are right, that it is very, and this is something that I've taught and we've spoken about a lot here, a lot of our faculty, is that Zionism requires, presupposes the right, the significance and moral value of power and the right of the Jewish people to use it. And if it's denied from us, then it's true. It's not for naught that the enemies of Israel want to take that away from us. And the whole nuance of colonialism, the addition of the argument of colonialism to the anti-Zionist conversation, which is a relatively more recent one. It used to be apartheid. It wasn't genocide, but it was apartheid. And it was colonialism makes our use of power, by definition, unjust. And it allows the other side, the classic Jewish argument always was, we offered peace and they said no. Once you put in the context of colonialism, it's a mitzvah to say no. Why should I accept your offer of compromise over my home? So colonialism was actually a genius addition. It was a brilliant addition to the anti-Zionist campaign. The fact that we lost it in so many circles is either a testimony to the foolishness of some of the people, because the term itself should have been something easily winnable for us. It's easily winnable. That was like to claim that this is a colonial enterprise. But the fact that we lost is either a testimony of the intellectual, academic, and moral depravity of some of the people who promulgated it, or of the poverty of our responses. Because now it's becoming, and now we don't know what's going to be easier. So thank you for that. Yes, please. Coming, just 1 second.
Thank you. Amazing lecture. I was intrigued by what you were saying about utopian thought, because I love the idea of challenging people to use imagination. And I've been asking everyone that I talk to here about politics, what would you do if you were Rosh HaMemshalah and you didn't have to worry about Ben Gvir or Smotrich? You could just decide what the plan was then or now. And what's been fascinating to me is that almost no Israeli that I ask that of has a coherent answer at all. They trail off.
We haven't thought about it. For 20 years, we haven't thought about it. It's exactly, that's been my experience. It's for 20 years. We have a generation which we have to catch up right now. And I'm waiting for leaders. I'm waiting. So I could teach. Well, what am I? I run the Hartman Institute. I'm not, like you have to understand who you are and who you're not. I'm a teacher. Public discourse is shaped by the population, so it's true. So I could affect. But the larger political leaders, even the most enlightened ones, I'm petrified from Bennett right now. And he's my savior. Because his vision of tomorrow is a government for the people. Now that's a pretty good idea. It's not a bad thing to have a government for the people, but for what? For where? For what direction? It's like he won't talk. He gets all the votes from the center-left. That's everybody who votes for him. He gets maybe 2 seats from the center-right. He's aspiring to get another 2 seats from the center-right. And as a result, he won't meet even with anybody from the center-left. He won't even talk to you. Because lest that takes away the 2 seats. And you don't exist, and I don't even know who he's going to fill his list with. He might have a token center-left person. He might have an Eisenkot. Might. But most of them are going to be center-right, even though his constituency is the center-left. What do you have to say to us? Bennett cannot utter the terms Palestinian state in conjunction with each other. He can't, Netanyahu can. Bennett cannot say the words Palestinian state. Is this being taped? Is this? Okay, so I won't say the next part. No, because it will be to reveal the confidence of people who've spoken to him. He just can't. He doesn't. And this is the great hope of the center-left. Like, where do we want to go? And then you're surprised that the great visionary of Israel is Prime Minister Trump. That's the visionary who's going to guide us to the promised land, to a future. Really? Yes, please. I'm just looking for a second. Just give me 1 second. I just want to enable to ensure that there is gender balance in the questions if there is a desire for it to be so, because sometimes people aren't as quick with their hands. I gave that chance. 1 second. So we're going to go. Yes, I just in the order that I saw them, and then I'm going to come. Yes, please.
So similar to the question about justice, my question is about the word peace. When at the end, when you were talking, I Googled Netanyahu speech peace. and he uses it all the time.
I know.
On the regular, to the Iranian people, we're peace-loving peoples. To the UN, we seek other peace-loving peoples. So
That's my whole, the class was, look, we have different, which peace? Beware, not of the person who doesn't use the term peace, but of the person who has a different meaning for the term peace. Thank you. Yes, please, and then in the back, and then I think we're just about done. Yes. I know some of you are also hungry. Yes, please.
You spoke about how we define ourselves as opposed to Hamas defining, and you talked in the kind of the progression of the shift of how people thought about loss of soldiers versus loss of civilians. Has there been any discussion in Israeli society about the losses in terms of the hostages, the soldiers, civilians, when people talk about how many more soldiers are we going to lose as we're trying to rescue
There is some.
50 civilians? If we lose 1,000 more soldiers, it's worth it. If we lose 2,000, it's
Yeah,
not
there's,
worth it.
you don't do that equation, but the conversation that does exist in Israel, and it's interesting how marginal the conversation is.
Is it a moral conversation, or
No,
is it just like a
no,
force?
like there is a moral conversation actually on the right-hand side, on Smotrich, and he is very frustrated by people who silence him and the fact that he can't have a serious conversation. It is a legitimate thing to have a conversation right now in Israel in which somebody says, there are 20 hostages alive, there are 30 hostages dead. Destroying Hamas is more important than these 20 hostages. And on moral grounds, we have to stop talking about hostages and do what we need to do in order to destroy Hamas. That's under the assumption, which is his assumption, that there is something that he could do, which makes it a coherent argument. It is almost impossible to have that conversation in Israel. And this is part is that the moral language is all on the sides of releasing the hostages, and I'm there too. But the other side, so if it is, it comes in on that side. Now, and then it says how many soldiers are going to have to die, etc., all of that. Usually in Israeli ethos, we don't do those calculations. And we send soldiers in to free one person, and we don't, it's like every life at that moment, it's not the greatest, maybe it is a great long-term strategy of how we look at our people and our responsibilities to each other. But that conversation is more or less absent in Israel. It's not a dominant one. It's almost like the dominant one is we have a moral response. This is, where's morality? There's a moral responsibility to return the hostages, period. Like that's the parameter of moral in among 70+% of Israeli society. Last question and comment. I saw someone who had their hand up. I think you at the end. Yes, last one, and then we're going to conclude. 3 minutes.
It was related to the peace part. I was like, we define what justice looks like, what peace looks like. But my question was more into not among Israeli society, what type of peace we want, is the counterpart. What is their definition of peace? What do you think is their definition of peace?
Sure, that's again, at the end of the day, when we negotiate, that will determine. First you start with what you want. And then reality comes in. Part of the idea of utopia is have an idea where you want to go. And then you could possibly shape reality, and then there's possibilities that you didn't take into account. You don't shape reality simply by accepting reality. Then reality is a determinist force. Now, at the end of the day, there is nobody. The job of utopia is not to believe that you could create a utopian reality. The job of utopia is to create an aspiration. And then aspirations have to meet reality. And part of that is to ask, what is the other side going to do? That's part of the story. But at least, what do you want? I don't want to have my aspirations defined by what they are going to make possible. And then who knows? Maybe I could change reality. And one of the great challenges in Israel is the most powerful Jewish people in history. The people who've achieved beyond anything that we could imagine. The people who have wiped out Hezbollah, have created the possibility of a new Lebanon, have removed all military danger in Damascus, in Syria, it's gone, who can fly unhindered to Tehran whenever we want, who've achieved unbelievable achievements, have no ability to imagine when everything that we are doing is the fulfillment of imagination. We just have to continue to imagine. Welcome to Israel, my friends, and thank you.